Hey everyone, Charlie here. Do Adam and Eve actually die in the garden? And I think the short answer is yes. Why am I even asking this question? Because they seem to live on past the garden. But in Genesis 2, verses 15, there's this conversation. God is still sort of describing the creation. And he says, God put man in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it. And the Lord commanded the man, saying, You may eat of any tree in the garden, but not the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day, and again, this is definitely emphasized in the original language, that you eat of it, you shall surely die, right? Not just you shall die, but you shall surely die. And so it's interesting because God warns them that they shall surely die. But if you were to look at the life of Adam and Eve, if we skip ahead to Genesis 5, we see the genealogy of Adam and Eve. And Adam actually lives to 930 years old, right? So not exactly the same day, which is what God warned them would happen. And so we have to look back to Genesis 3 and even Genesis 4 and say, okay, wait a minute, then what did happen when they ate the fruit? And so this whole conversation actually takes place between the serpent and Eve, where he says, she tells him, God said, don't eat the fruit or you're going to die. And he says, you will not surely die. So, this sort of begs the question, who's telling the truth here, God or the serpent? Because the serpent does say, if you eat the fruit, you're going to know good and evil, but he also says you will not surely die. And they did get to know good and evil. So, again, who's lying, the serpent or God? And the minute they ate the fruit, though, we notice something takes place. And I think because we're not used to looking this carefully at these sorts of stories, we don't always catch what happens, right? Do they get the knowledge of good and evil? Yes, they do, but they also get, as a bonus, they realize they're naked. And then when God comes to begin talking to them, they start accusing each other. Well, she gave it to me. Well, the serpent gave it to me. And then, so the first thing that happens is something does die, right? And shame and guilt enters into their life and their existence, as well as judgment of other people. And then in the very next chapter, because I really think Genesis 3 through 11 is sort of the whole fall narrative, but certainly Genesis 3 and 4 have some very specific stuff. You see Cain gets very angry and actually hatred enters into the world and he kills his brother Abel, right? So the reason I mention all this is because then through the rest of the Bible, there is an issue of us being partially dead, right? And the way it's described in Ezekiel is God needs to take our heart of stone and give us a heart of flesh. The way Jesus says it, and then sometimes Paul says it, is that we need a new life, right? We need to be born again and born of the Spirit. And then what I think really happens in Genesis chapter 3, and this is the other way it's described, so heart, life, and there's even other words for it, is that there was a spirit part of us that died in the garden, right? And the most immediate evidence of that death was that shame and guilt, they knew they were naked, and then that judgment towards each other, and then ultimately that hatred that you see in Cain and Abel. And those are really consequences of being spiritually dead. And that's what happened. They did die that day in the garden, actually at that very moment that they ate the fruit. So God was telling the truth, and the devil was lying. And that day they did surely die.